My name is Logan Lyles. I'm the founder of Demand Shift. We help B2B brands, especially marketing agencies and MarTech companies, build thought leadership and lead gen engines at the same time with ongoing educational webinar series. So we do that through done for you webinar service, as well as access to the audience that we're building.
I think one of the first things I said to you when you went on your own was it's about time. What
Mhm.
was the turning point for you? How did you decide that it was time?
So I had been thinking about it for a while, had talked with folks like you and Chris Dubois and a few others that I think your first comments literally on my, hey, I'm starting my own thing, new position, quote unquote, post on LinkedIn was like, it's about time. And fortunately or unfortunately, part of that decision was made for me because I ended up getting let go last year for the first time ever in my career journey. And what was funny, man, is like a week before that, my wife and I were like, man, I kind of, we've been talking about this for a while. I feel like I need a little bit more runway. I could make this work if things weren't a little bit different. My wife and I got married young. We've been a 2-kid, single income household for 16 years. And we were just like, not right now, not right now. And plus my wife was like, well, you're also kind of a model employee. Like, they say entrepreneurs are almost like unhireable and, they go through and they've been let go, they've been fired, these sorts of things. And we're like, yeah, that's not really you either. So I don't know, maybe just not right now. Maybe we can start to build things slowly. And about a week later, I got let go for the first time ever. And so it was like, I looked at my wife and I said, I think I can find 5 to 6 clients before I can find a job to replace our income. And I think this path not only is quicker, but in the long run, it's what we want to do. And I think it will be, able to earn more and all the other things that come with solopreneurship too.
Dude, that resonates because I had a similar transition, like the accidental entrepreneur in a lot of ways. You're like, well, I got let go. I jokingly say my wife works for our boys. So similar, we have
Mhm.
like a
Yep.
similar household structure. And I was in the same position, man. I get it. And then you're like, well, I think I could probably do this thing faster than it would take me to apply for a job. And if you even looked, but it's like 2,000 applicants on every job.
Mhm.
And then you're like, am I going to convince somebody
Mhm.
that like I can do this? Like, should I even try? Like, what is the point? So I
Mhm.
get it. Obviously, you're still doing it. So you got the clients. The question is, how did you get them?
Yeah. Yeah. It's funny because I was just talking to a friend of mine who's in a very similar spot. Like 9 months ago, I guess it was when I went out on my own. He's sitting right there. And I was like, man, I was right on the other side of this conversation 9 months ago. And so it was actually good kind of reflection for me to say, okay, what did I do? What would I do differently? Those sorts of things. So I kind of thought about it in terms of concentric circles of my network. And it may sound cheesy, but if you've been an entrepreneur or you've been in sales and marketing, especially on the sales side where I started my career, you've heard this phrase before that your network is your net worth. And man, the experience over the last 9 months really drove the truth of that home for me. And so I looked at my network and I looked at it as these concentric circles, going back to where I started. And I started with the folks that I really, really knew well. Thankfully for me, I had already figured out like what is my service offering going to be? Who is going to be my target market? Because I had already been thinking about and workshopping this offer and this service to go with it. So I knew that. So if you don't have that, you got to start there before you start thinking about how am I going to drum up business. And you and I both know lots of solopreneurs don't think enough about their offer before they try to go to market. So just plug for everything you talk about there. But I started with the innermost concentric circle. Who are the folks that are closest to me? And I can say, hey, here's what's going on. Maybe even share with them all the details of, the raw reality of the accidental entrepreneur, as you put it, and not ask them for business, but say, hey, here's what I'm doing. Here's what I'm offering. And here's who it's for. Who do you know you could introduce me to? Right. And those started with phone calls, with texts, with let's hop on a Zoom call, with maybe folks I'm not that close with. Hey, a LinkedIn DM, those sorts. And so initially it was, hey, can you refer me to anybody? Right. And I'd say the other part of that first concentric circle was being very intentional about kind of my launch post on LinkedIn. Everybody who's been active on LinkedIn for several years, like you and I, Nick, knows that the starting a new position post always blows up because as much as LinkedIn is an advertising and a social media platform, there's still a recruiting and job board platform even though that's not the way we usually think of it. So I took advantage of that and did a starting a new position post that actually landed me one of my first 3 clients from that. And so I asked some of the folks that were close to me, hey, can you go support this? Hey, here's the link. I told you I was launching on Monday. Here's that post. Can you go tag some folks and that sort of stuff? And then from there, this actually came to me from someone I know we both know, Pete Caputa over at DataBox. And I had looked at what they've always done when it comes to like research in order to create content. And I thought, okay, well, I'm building this solo agency to help B2B brands with webinars. What if I spun up my own little research project and I use that as a foot in the door to start conversations with the next circle out of my network of people that I know? I had 20,000 connections on LinkedIn at that point. A lot of those folks are B2B marketers, either agency side or in-house, that I would be serving. Some of them were former clients when I was at Sweetfish. Some of them I just knew from LinkedIn. So they weren't the sort of people that I felt comfortable saying, hey, can you refer me? But if I had a reason to reach out that might be applicable for them or someone else in their shoes, then I thought, hey, if I come up with this survey that I just called the state of lead gen for B2B webinars, and I developed a 25 to 30 question survey that I spun up in Typeform, I started doing both manual and some automated outreach to folks to say, hey, I'm doing some research. This is the area that I'm working in right now. Do you know anyone who would want to take the survey? They could get quoted in the report that I'll create out of it, and you'll get access to the data as well. And I had over 250 people take me up on that, take the survey. And that fed kind of the long game of starting to create content around webinars, but it actually opened a lot of doors, not only from people saying, oh, this is what you're doing, like, tell me more about that, right? But also I used it as a foot in the door for direct sales conversations, because at the end of that 30 question survey, I said, hey, would you like to book a call with a team that specializes in running high converting webinar series for B2B brands like yours? And I had people say that, like, oh, I was answering all these questions about my challenges and my current benchmarks in my webinars. And then you offer like a call with an expert in this area, which was the call with me. And I hooked that into my meeting link. I booked a lot of calls. And even just about a month ago, I closed another client from that had started from that effort back 9 months ago. So it was a long rambling answer, but that's kind of how I thought about it. Like, start small and then expand out from there.
I love the relationship marketing approach, because you said something that is a drum that we've been beating for years, which is like, you don't need all the clients in the world. You're like, I need like 3 to 5 good clients. And in order to do that, it's not like, how much can I post to LinkedIn? I mean, that's a part of the marketing, but you went to people and you started as many conversations as you possibly could. And it's something that we try so hard to drill this into people's heads, because they're like, well, my post or my video didn't get all these views. And it's like, you don't need all the views. Like, we're not in traffic marketing here. So I love the approach to doing that. And I think it shows because, one, I mean, you've also been doing things like that, not in that same way, but you've been building relationships with people through Sweetfish, through your time at Teamwork, and with the agency most recently. Like, just part of your role was meeting as many people as possible. I mean, just hosting agency life and all that stuff. So I feel like it's probably came naturally to you. When I talk to people about this, they always tell me, I don't really want to go outbound. And I'm curious, did it feel like outbound to you?
Not at all. And when I looked at the metrics, I don't have them in front of me right now, but I took a screenshot because my outbound on LinkedIn for the survey, as kind of the foot in the door, and like you said, the relationship marketing piece, as well as just research development, I did some of that manual and I did some of it automated with a tool, Dripify, that maybe some of you have heard of. And normally I'm not a fan of a lot of automated, spammy outbound, right? And if you're a solopreneur or an agency owner or someone like that, you know that the relationships are important. You don't want to just burn a bunch of bridges by doing that sort of outbound. But to me, when I posted a screenshot of the campaign results of like how many replies, how many responses, those sorts of things from that Dripify campaign, I was like, this is not like cold outbound, right? I'm getting like 25% reply rates, not 1% reply rates. And so that, like, maybe not be the way that you're thinking I would answer that, but it's like, quantitatively, it showed me that the people on the other end of the message did not view this as typical quote unquote outbound with all of the negative connotations that we normally have with it, if that makes sense.
Yeah, completely. Because I can't tell you how many people feel cringy. They're like, I don't want to, what am I supposed to say to somebody? And when someone tells me, yeah, I'm using Dripify, and this is nothing against Dripify, I don't know anything.
Mhm.
It's like, it's just the way that people tend to use the tool
Yes.
is for evil.
Mhm.
And so
With great power
you,
comes great responsibility. It's like
yeah,
Uncle
to
Ben taught us, right?
that just like Uncle Ben. It's like there you can use it to spam everybody on
Mhm.
LinkedIn, or you can use it to offer them to contribute to research. And I ask you if it felt like outbound because what I call starting conversations and building relationships, a lot of people feel that there's friction there and they don't know how to reach out or they don't know what to say. I'm
Mhm.
like they're like, I don't like doing cold outbound. I'm like,
Mhm.
we are in the business. Like you can warm people up. I would be willing to bet that 99% of the people you reached out to were probably fairly warm, whether they've liked or commented on something or viewed your profile, or you've probably known them in a past life through all the work that you've
Mhm.
done.
Mhm.
How did you decide who to reach out to?
Yeah. So initially, like just thinking about my network, it was people that I have the closest relationships with, right? The kind of the second level was, as you mentioned, I've been doing a lot of collaborative content creation for a number of years, hosting the B2B growth show at Sweetfish, hosting the Agency Life podcast at Teamwork, networking at conferences through content creation. But then I got tactical with it, and I've got a friend who does a lot with like data pipelines for B2B companies and leveraging Clay and things like that to do data enrichment or find the right targets of folks. And he was like, "Hey man, if you export your LinkedIn connections, you're not going to get emails for everybody, but you can take all of your LinkedIn connections and export that to a CSV and have all of those LinkedIn profiles. We could use Clay to look at what companies are they at, and then is there a mention of webinars on their website?" And so that step of just exporting the data that I had, I didn't have an email list to speak of, right? All I had was LinkedIn. So I was like, what can I do with this? And so then that gave me, out of the 20,000 LinkedIn connections I have, like 4 to 5,000 that, I can go through it with a fine tooth comb because I had to get clients. Like I had to, not shotgun, but not laser, right? Like maybe just, a decent rifle pointed in the right direction. And so we narrowed that down to a list of like 4 or 5,000. And then I used that in Dripify and created a sequence that was very low pressure. That was like, hey, we haven't chatted in a while. I'm doing this thing with webinars. I launched this report. If you would like to take it, takes about 4 minutes to do the survey. Here's what you get out of it. Let me know. And then like one or two touches after that. So it wasn't this hard charging like 5 to 7 step sequence. It was primarily just to people I was already connected with. And I did a little bit to try and not hyper personalize it, but at least send it to my most potentially relevant contacts. So it felt less spammy, even though they were getting kind of a canned message.
I love this because you didn't sit around like a lot of people like sit around and they're just like, how can I post more and try to get an inbound lead to come through? And there's a lot to be said for going to get it.
Mhm.
And I appreciate having done a research report like you described. Like I'm shocked you got 250
Mhm.
responses.
I
Like
was too. I was
I
too.
couldn't get that many. I
Mhm.
definitely didn't get that many. It is hard. It is really hard, but it's a super compelling way to reach out to somebody because for all the reasons you said, you're not trying to like sell them anything. You're just like, hey, here's a report that is relevant. But yeah, I mean, it also just takes a lot of work to reach out to enough people to get 250 responses. So the fact that you got that as robust of a data set as you did also created probably a ton of content for you and more marketing and more fuel for your marketing. There's an unlimited amount of upside here.
Informed my sales calls, right? When people are like, hey, especially when you're starting out with a new offer and you don't have skins on the wall and you don't have case studies and examples to point to. And people are like, well, if we start a webinar series and we have no email list and only have this much to invest in LinkedIn ads and this maybe like, what can we expect? And I'm like, I can speak to my own experience because it came from my own experience of running webinars unsuccessfully, tweaking the framework, and then finding success and building that into my own framework. But I only had my results, which are one off and maybe not statistically significant to point to, hey, here's what you can expect, new Mr. or Mrs. potential client. Well, now on those sales calls, I could say, well, hey, I actually just surveyed 250 B2B marketers. Their average benchmark for registrations is X. Their average attendance rate on webinars is Y. Also, I asked people like, what's working? And I got some tactics that actually helped me improve the service as well. And so it improved my marketing, my sales, and my service all at once. And so I'm a big fan of that. And what I was mentioning earlier, I actually hosted a webinar and a LinkedIn Live earlier today about something I've done at industry conferences, big and small, from like inbound in Boston to a local agency event out here in Denver a couple years ago. And what I was sharing was how you can go into an industry conference and use content as your networking tool. Because probably similar to a lot of you listening to this, I hate quote unquote working a room of walking in and forcing yourself into that little circle that's already created, right? And introducing yourself and what do you do? And like, I just really don't like that. And one of the things I've done multiple times, and I was training on kind of my framework for this, was using content as the door opener at industry events. And I did this, for instance, when I was at Teamwork hosting Agency Life. Instead of trying to book meetings with agencies I was trying to meet and get to our booth at Teamwork, I reached out and said, hey, I'm doing quick 15-minute man on the street style interviews. I want to ask you 5 or 6 questions. Do you want to meet up? Here's my meeting link. You can grab some time and we'll make it easy and I'll create some content featuring you. I feel much more comfortable making that ask and then going into a big event where I don't have to work the room. I've already kind of pre-set up what it's going to be like for me because I've created a lot of audio and video content, been in front of the camera a lot, but I'm still very much an introvert and prefer the one-on-one conversations to kind of like working the room and your typical networking. And so similar to using the research report, the survey plus the report as kind of the carrot I could dangle on LinkedIn and not doing typical outreach, I've used content creation as the carrot to dangle to fill up my calendar when going to an event. But it's really the same thing. It's leading with value. It's putting a different ask in front of someone and one that's easy for them to say yes to, and one that has multiple benefits out the other side if you put in just a little work on the front end to pre-plan it. Because just like, hey, do you want to hear about my service? Doesn't work well on LinkedIn. Hey, do you want to grab a coffee at the event? Really isn't compelling either.
I love this approach. And I hear a lot of people who want to do things like this, but then the question that always comes up is, but what do I do after? Like, how do I turn that into a business opportunity? And not all of them will, right? Like,
Yeah.
obviously, not
I mean,
all of them are going
that's
to
my
become.
first answer is recognize that not all of them will, right? Nothing in sales or marketing is 100%. Ad CTRs, our open rates on emails, our sales pipeline. If anything's 100%, then you're a billionaire and you
Something's
should
wrong.
retire or you're doing
Something's
something
broken.
wrong, something illegal possibly, right? So yeah, I would agree with you. Like that's the first thing to check off, at least mentally.
Yeah, the way that I've always seen it is like conversations build relationships, and some relationships will become business opportunities or lead to a business opportunity, I should say. But there's nothing wrong with having more relationships.
Mm-hmm.
And to your point, in one of the first things you said, like your network is your net worth. I also had faced that very sobering reality because like I had nothing when I went out on my own. I had only my coworkers and I posted on LinkedIn like a little bit and I haven't really met anyone when I went out on my own. So like trying to fast track that after the fact
Hard.
is super, it's a frustrating process when you're not too sure. So I think you had a lot of ground. You had already covered quite a bit of ground going out on your own, where I think quite a few people start the day they decide to go out on their own versus like you had been working up to this and kind of building that muscle for years. I am curious why webinars? Like, how did you ultimately land on that as the offer and the thing you were going to do? Like, because you could have done anything, and most people don't show up with their own offer, or they'll show up with I can do anything, and then they get there eventually. But you started with that.
Mm-hmm. I mean, part of it was I'd been thinking about how to go out on my own for a while. I had some clients on the side, and it was kind of all in this area of audio, video, content creation, LinkedIn, thought leadership, organic social content, because that's kind of been the world I had played in since about 2018 when I joined Sweetfish. For folks who don't know, as you and I have mentioned them, they're a podcast production agency now that's focused primarily on B2B video creation. Shout out to my buddy James over there. But when I started there, I started hosting their podcast and B2B growth and running sales for them. And so obviously let's see, I was there for 4 years. I have 4 years of podcast production, strategy, show launching, show promotion experience. When I was at Teamwork, I hosted and produced the Agency Life podcast, but I also ran the webinar series. And so some of my clients on the side, I had actually kind of merged those. And like my offer was, hey, Nick, you don't have a podcast. Maybe you don't have time for a podcast or a webinar. Let's you and I hop on Riverside and record just like we're doing for this podcast, but let's just record it to get your expertise out. And I'll turn that into LinkedIn content for you. And I had a few clients where that ran pretty well, but eventually they kind of, especially with LinkedIn's declining impressions and those sorts of things, it became tougher for me to see like people are really going to see value for that, be willing to pay for that. They're going to ask about the results, and I don't have like hard and fast numbers to show them, right? And frankly, I didn't have a really great playbook of like post this much, you'll get this much inbound, to show for it. Thought about podcasting. There's just more and more competition there. But the other thing that happened was while I was at Teamwork, the Agency Life, the webinar side of that media property, we ran monthly webinars, and I actually didn't see a ton of results. I leaned so hard on the brand building side, and I think that had a lot of influence attribution, but the direct attribution was frankly kind of weak. And so when I went back agency side, I learned from a friend this funnel that he built for newsletter ads. So my buddy Marketing Max, if you can check him out, marketingmax.com, he runs several newsletters himself and several for his clients. So he's got a media side of the business and an agency side. And he introduced me to this idea of like a funnel that splits your hot leads from your warm leads. And so what they do is they will run ads for a brand's newsletter. People will sign up. That's great. But when you're signing up for a lead magnet, a newsletter, a webinar, whatever, what normally happens? You hit a thank you page, right? And even though with a webinar, only maybe 30% of people show up to the webinar, 100% of people see that thank you page. And what he does instead of that thank you page is he starts asking people questions in a one question at a time survey that ends with a call to action to take the next step with that brand. And I was like, that's interesting. That could work for a webinar registration flow. I could have this like sign up and then answer a few more questions. If you're qualified, get the opportunity to book a call. And so I molded that into what I call the two-step sign up process for webinars. And I 5x'd my conversion from webinar registrant to booked sales call. And we all know that your offer is so much more compelling if you have quantifiable outcomes that you have delivered that you can point to that next client. And so I was like, well, one, people see webinars as more hard and fast lead gen. So that's probably, more valuable and budget to be had there. And I have some social proof that is quantifiable that I can point to. And there's kind of a before and after story. Plus, I have all this webinar and content repurposing experience across like podcasts and LinkedIn. I could apply all that to webinars. And the last piece of it was like, I really got into loving hosting. Like you said, before we hit record, like it's weird for me to be on the other side of the mic. I'm usually hosting these sorts of conversations. And I was like, well, if I do this, I could insert myself as a host and my client webinars could be more like live podcasts. So they get like the benefit of that and the benefit of this. So that's a really long answer to a short question of why webinars, but it was just like all these different things coming together of like where my skill set, my experience, the market need, and the social proof and the story that I had to tell all kind of came together and helped me land on an offer that 9 months later, I'm refining and changing a little bit, but that core offer still is what it is. And that's what I'm doing at Demand Shift still.
You make a good point about the podcasting thing, which is like, it's really crowded.
Mm-hmm.
And even the LinkedIn thing, like, well, we'll talk for an hour and I'll get you clips and stuff, like also very crowded, like becoming very commodified. And it's a tough place to be. And so one, very few people in the webinar space. So I agree with you. I think, and like you said, you check the box on solving a massive problem, which is all agencies struggle with lead gen. Mm-hmm. Webinars are traditionally super boring. And so like to try and make it feel more like a podcast and less like a someone just talking head at a going through a presentation. Like, and I think for you, if you're hosting the webinar for your clients, is that right?
Yeah.
That's lead gen for you because people see you at the thing. I mean, maybe if their clients are the right people, but
Yeah.
I can't tell you
It's
how
basically
many.
the permissionless demo, right?
Bingo.
Mhm.
I can't tell you. We were working with someone who's an event marketer, and she helps all these tech companies go to events, and whether they're sponsoring or hosting their own events or whatever
Mhm.
it is. And part of her job is to be on site at that event, make sure it runs. And she's like, every time we host one, like I come back with all these leads.
Mhm.
And I'm like, well, like they see you in action and they see what you did and they want that for themselves. They see themselves as someone who can host an event like that.
Mhm.
And so it's very like, of course you're coming back with leads. It makes total sense.
Mhm.
And I see a similar, I imagine a similar play for you that's or a similar flywheel for you because they can see you just run it and they're like, this makes this feel so easy.
Yeah. Yeah, exactly. I've literally gotten clients that way. And what's interesting too is I actually had a new potential client book a call with me. He was kind of under the impression I mostly just did consulting and not like a full done for you service for webinars. And he had actually been on a webinar that I was running with my client. And he was like, "Oh, I didn't even realize they were a client. I just thought it was like a content collaboration you were doing." And so that's kind of what we're already talking about. But then also, like, it's lead gen for me in a very, very natural way. And it's also, hey, my clients, this feels like less self-serving when I'm hosting and I'm doing the call to action for them to say, hey, if you want to take the next step with Will Rico and the team at Common Mind, who's one of my clients, and they're an agency that does AEO and GEO services for B2B SaaS companies, it's it's less pushy and salesy than Will being like, hey, if you want to book a call, here's my calendar link. I'm actually kind of talking them up. And so I didn't even think about that, like third party validation actually making their webinar lead gen more effective, but it's happened. And like you said, the flywheel is the perfect word for it, because the more I do that for my clients, the more people are seeing me do that and they want that done for them. And so it's more effective for my clients and it's more effective in marketing demand shift and what we do at the exact same time.
I mean, it's kind of brilliant, honestly, because you don't have to. It's putting you in front of people in a way that very few other services provide.
Mhm.
Like marketing proof is a big part of our process, or helping people kind of market the proof that their work works and that they're capable of making a difference for people. And it's so easy. Like for this, the event marketing example that I just gave, it's a similar thing. It's like when people can just see you in action
Yeah.
in your environment, it's like, it just makes your life so much easier. So
Mhm.
talk me through what the business looks like today. I mean, how many clients do you serve? And it's just like this one primary core offer. And do you have like any contractors or consultants that help you?
Yeah. Right now, I think I'm sitting at 7 clients right now. That's a mixture of ongoing retainer clients. Most of my clients, they sign on to an initial quarter, so 3 months worth of the done for you webinar service, and then we do renewals based on that. I have some clients where I just come in and consult and say, "Hey, we really like this idea of this two-step sign up process that you talked about, to where we can like bifurcate between the look and learners and the hot leads and get them booked with our sales team even before the webinar starts. Can you just come in, audit our existing webinar program, show us what to improve, and then give us a plan?" So I have a few clients where I'm doing that as well. I built a course and like a snapshot and all of the prompts that I use that I'm selling for about $1,000. I've only sold one of those. It hasn't been a real big driver, but I also haven't put a ton behind marketing that. I'm used to more selling the ongoing retainers, the higher touch, higher ticket sales, and like selling some like that downsell offer. I haven't really refined my process, or maybe it's not the right supplementary offer, but we'll see. Where the business is now and where it's going is really interesting. And it's around this idea of the flywheel and like, where can you put in one bit of effort and get two or three different outputs? And it's along this line of where I've kind of inserted myself, not as just like a behind the curtain service provider for my clients, So a little bit of context, and this will make sense of how I'm basically making the pivot from just a service-based agency to a media company that also has done for you services. And it's again where we interact with our clients, not kind of behind the curtain. So when I do webinars for my clients, it's the 4 P's, well, kind of planning, promotion, production, and then repurposing. But we run a lot of that on our own tech stack, which I initially did because I was like, with every client, I don't want to go through this, like, what webinar platform are we using? What marketing automation platform are we using? The 2-step sign up is very simple, but there's some certain things with your webinar platform or your landing page or your form or survey software that you just have to get right for it all to work and maximize the conversions the way that we've seen. So I was like, you know what? For that reason, lack of headache and quicker time to value, honestly, for my clients, I'm going to run their webinar series all on my own tech stack, right? Well, what that now has done is that for every client I bring on, for the most part, I'm running their webinars on my tech stack, which means I'm growing the audience of demand shift as well and pushing the leads out to my clients so they can pull them into their own systems. But then I've been able to cross market to this audience of like, hey, you were just on this webinar for Common Mind about AI SEO. I've got another client who's a MarTech company who also talks about this, and they're going to be talking about it from a different angle. Do you want to come to this webinar? And so it's become kind of this rising tide that floats all boats, that I'm not just this service provider starting from scratch with each client. It's like this growing swell of the audience that I'm building and the crossover potential between my different clients. And so for that reason, I've actually basically, our service works for anybody in B2B, whether you're a SaaS or you're a service-based business. I don't do anything outside of B2B. However, now I'm really drilling into really the I in my ICP, like who is the ideal customer profile. And those are not only B2B, but folks that sell to marketing agencies or to in-house B2B marketers, because that's where now I have an owned audience of about 6,000 folks. I have 20,000 connections on LinkedIn that fit that profile as well. I mean, not all of them, but I'm actually going through and kind of removing connections so that can be a higher percentage of my LinkedIn network. Because then not only can I continue to deliver the services, but it's easier to generate results because now a new client comes on. We don't have to spend $2,000 on LinkedIn ads to drive the same results because we can tap into my existing email list. Or if we do that plus LinkedIn ads, we can drive 50% more, whatever it is, right? And then as I have this built-in audience, there's other revenue streams that aren't kind of the info product downsell. It's sponsorships or paid placements or those sorts of things. And it's like those opportunities give more exposure to my clients' webinars. And each client webinar that I run builds the audience that's more valuable for them and the rest of my clients, and demand shift at the same time. And so it becomes this win-win-win. And it's not necessarily a model that I've heard of before. I keep trying to explain it to people, and sometimes the light comes on or it clicks. So you can tell me how I'm explaining it, and if it actually makes sense or if it's confusing, or if you're like, no, Logan, this is, you're trying to do too many things at once. I'm open to the live feedback and coaching, even though we're just recording a podcast.
You've lost your mind, Logan. No, this is actually super interesting because if I'm getting this right, basically you have an interest graph on someone. You're saying they've attended webinars around certain topics. So AI, whatever type of SEO or lead gen or whatever the thing might be. And so you can remarket to them to get them to join other relevant webinars. And every time you run one, the size of your database grows. I guess, is there an opt-in? Like, do people I feel like it's like, I wouldn't want to feel like people are getting their data's like getting sold or something like that. I know you're conscious of that stuff, but those things aside, I mean, I think you could certainly upsell like, hey, and we'll also cross market to our database of people. There's a huge value there.
Yeah. So, I mean, we basically say, we're starting to position, again, Demand Shift more as the media company. So it's like, hey, I'm signing up for a Demand Shift webinar, and we're going to get emails about other webinars that are running within this series. Like, now I have some clients outside of B2B marketing that are like, we sell to accountants or to manufacturers or whatever. I've kind of kept that separate because one, they're not really opting in for content here, there, and everywhere, right? Nor is it going to be applicable. That feels a little bit more like, oh, I'm just like telling clients, oh, I had this size of a database, right? But what's interesting is that with that two-step sign-up process that I mentioned that has been more effective to route the hot leads directly to your sales team when they're signing up for webinars, there's usually 6 to 8 questions that every webinar registrant answers about their geography, their seniority level, their industry, their company size. We can get some of that with enrichment, but we both know that first party data about their demographics as well as their pain points. I'm not only building a targeted list of, B2B folks, but they are telling me what are their biggest challenges. I can see what webinars that they're signing up for, right? And so I actually just recently had Claude look at my database and what do I have? Like what percentage of agency owners, what percentage of in-house marketers, what's the average seniority level, those sorts of things. It was like, boom, here you go. And I was like, I didn't even set out to create a sponsor rate card or something like that. But basically that's kind of the prompt that I gave Claude. And it was like, oh, here's what you have in the database that you've built, based on this process so far. And the other thing is I just ran a webinar just myself talking about the content-based networking at events that we were talking about earlier. And I just did a 30-minute webinar solo. It wasn't an interview. I streamed it to my LinkedIn. Probably had 50 or 60 people sign up for that. I partially did it just to test Riverside's new webinar and live streaming capabilities, but also so I had been talking with someone about doing that on a podcast. So I was like, oh, I'll do this. I'll test Riverside. I'll get some content out about this. Well, guess what? Now that's 50 or 60 more people who have, one, not only seen me run a webinar, so it's the permissionless demo, but two, now they are adding to my database, which benefits the database that I'm growing for ourselves at Demand Shift, but also the database that we can have our clients be able to market to. And so it's another example of those win-win-win. And that was one of the things for me that was so hard, kind of having one toe into solopreneurship. It's like, it's not just about the time, it's about the focus and the amount of output you can get for each thing that you're doing. It's like you're playing whack-a-mole of you can only whack one thing at a time, right? Versus, hey, I'm doing this and it's benefiting the short term, the long term, something else over here that might come up with more of the flywheel motion. It's probably not a good whack-a-mole versus a flywheel, but that's the best I can come up with on the fly.
I like the idea that you take a lot of the edge off of marketing and you can be really targeted with it. So when we talk about differentiation, I know there's a few people that will do webinars, but there's nobody that will produce or provide the ability to market that in that targeted of a way to people who are already attending webinars. It just doesn't exist. And I would imagine that could you run LinkedIn ads to a targeted list? Sure. But the relevance is, not even close to what this is. So as far as differentiation is concerned, at this time, I think it might be bulletproof in a lot of ways.
Don't say that. You're going to jinx me, man.
I know someone else is going to start a webinar company, start building this list. But I think the only thing that comes to my mind about it is, I think a lot about dependency when it comes to working with our clients. And I always try to optimize no dependency. I want everyone to be free and be able to take the stuff. And so there are pros and cons to running everything on your tech stack, right? The pro is it's much faster. It's just easier. Everyone gets time to value is shorter, all that good stuff. But then it can create a type of dependency where we don't necessarily they have the muscle to run a webinar, but they don't have all the infrastructure. So that to me sometimes is, and I know it's not because we're not trying to lock anybody in. We're trying to make things easy.
Right. Yeah. And I did have one client who basically said that of we actually don't want you to do it for us. We want you to train the trainer. We're going to bring in a marketing person, somewhat junior level, but capable if they can be trained by someone with your level of marketing experience. And I took 3 months. I installed my system, showed them what tech stack to use, allowed them to build it on their own. And, that cost more to do on the upfront, but they'll spend less than they would have had they been doing it for a year or two with me. And so some people see that and they're like, yeah, I'll take that side of the trade-off. And other folks have been like, there's no such thing as, no trade-offs. Every decision you make, you're saying yes to something, you're saying no to something else, you're saying less of this or more of that. And so, yeah, it's been interesting just so far, more clients have chosen one trade-off versus the other. So
Yeah, there's nothing wrong with that at all. And I think being able to execute quickly is a competitive advantage. To
yeah,
not spend 3 months planning and to be like, we can get
yeah,
up and running as fast as possible. So,
yeah, exactly.
Logan, looking back, what's something you would have done differently?
That's a good question. I think maybe I would have started with the audience building even sooner than what I'm doing right now. Like up until recently, there's only been like one or two just dedicated live streams or webinars that I've put on without a client. And I'm moving towards like 1 to 2 a week between client webinars, our own stuff, and live streams to continue to build the audience to be able to cross promote and say, hey, we just did this series. They're not a client. We have this other one coming up. The content from this client. I've been so much more a brand and content guy. And where I'm sitting now, it's not like I've jumped over to the performance marketer who's running your Google ads or even your LinkedIn ads, but I am finding myself moving more into the demand gen side and trying to blend the brand and demand at the same time. And so I would say, yeah, if I could build an audience even more to have those, like, these are the results you're likely going to see very quickly, and maybe, continue to beef up on like LinkedIn ads. How can I know enough to be dangerous there, even though that's not my offer? But if I could do that really well for webinars, then that makes this even more powerful. And so it's just some of those things that I'm doing now in learning and sharpening. I maybe just would have started a little bit sooner, but who knows if I actually would have had the time, because I'm still doing pretty much all of the delivery myself. My next step is deciding, like, what do I want to hand off to a VA and or Claude Code? What makes sense for either of those scenarios or neither of them? That's where I'm kind of struggling right now, is deciding what to offload, what not to. If I create a process and offload this either via automation or delegation, is it going to need to change in 4 weeks and I spent too much time delegating the wrong thing? So there's a lot of those what ifs operationally I'm trying to figure out.
I know the feeling. And it's standardize, automate, delegate, or keep it. Like those are kind of the options with all the work. And the question is like, well, where's your time best spent? So dude, this is really cool. I love where you're going with this. It is super compelling, and I haven't heard of many people doing anything quite like it. So I love it. It's good to see you, man. Thank you for coming
Likewise.
on. Thank you for sharing your story with me, dude. And I know more people feel seen because of it. So with that, I thank you.
Awesome. Thanks for having me, man. I appreciate it.
Toughest question first. Logan Lyles, what would be your last meal on Earth?
Oh man, my last meal on Earth. That really is a tough one. It's probably going to be something very spicy, because I've realized that I don't have a great sense of smell, and so it takes a lot of like flavor and spice for me to like, uh, it's a double-edged sword where I don't get a ton of flavor normally, but then also like I can handle a lot of stuff, and there's not a whole lot other than pickles I turn down. So, yeah, maybe some good Cajun food of some kind. A lot of people don't know this because I lost my accent when I moved from the South at 10, but I'm originally from Southwest Louisiana. And, there's some good food down there between crawfish etouffee, shrimp fettuccine, that sort. So it'd probably be something in that range.
Spicy. I dig it, man. I'm also a glutton for punishment. Sometimes I'm like, turn the heat up. And then I realize I've made a huge mistake.
Yeah. Yeah. Been there.
So you ever go to like a Thai place and you're like, make it spicy, and they're like, are you sure?
Listen. Yeah.
They're like, yeah, I don't think you know what you're talking about, dude. I love it, dude.